Thank you all so much for coming again. Like Joshua said, my name is Michael Conrad, and I hiked the Appalachian Trail. Let me spell it out for you the first time, but from here on I'm going to say the AT because I don't want to do that much spelling. So it's abbreviated as the AT. So this is me. 4 million so on and so on exact steps that were required for me to get from Georgia to Maine. Again, I graduated from here, the interpreting program, in 2016. After graduation, I was really lucky to be asked by Joshua to interpret for him on a study abroad in Croatia. And my first response actually was that I wouldn't do it. I had all kinds of plans. But after his repeated requests, I finally decided that I would go ahead and do it. And that was really lucky of me. If I had actually said no, then I probably wouldn't have ended up hiking the AT. Honestly, I really don't think that I would have done that. So I did decide to go to Croatia, and I did planned so that I could afford to do the AT. So I really have Joshua to thank in a big way. So I'm a Coda. I grew up with parents who were signing all the time. My dog at home, we're all deaf. They're all deaf, you know. So we had a safety dog. We grew up signing. We did lights. We flicked lights. We had light doorbells. If my mom would yell, MJ, and I would come down to dinner and talk to her, there was no, excuse me, what's for dinner to my mom. I would come down, up and down when dinner was ready. And that was my start of hiking, is coming up and down these stairs when my mom would yell at me for dinner over and over and over to talk to my mom. And I have one other experience. I worked at Kmark 7 in the Adirondack Mountains, and they had a CODA program there. And I grew up going and worked as a counselor as well. One of my counselors, E, talked about the AT, you know, and I never thought about growing up that I would hike the AT at all. The concept of the AT was actually introduced to me 2 or 3 years ago by E. And they told me about through hiking, which meant that you took an amount of time to hike the entire trail. And that was really selfish because you were just hiking. You weren't working. You weren't contributing to society. You were just hiking for yourself. So I learned that concept, and I always had it in the back of my mind at that point. And it kind of, I would put things out on Facebook. I would try to fundraise. I wasn't benefiting from that. I did get money, but none of it went directly to me. Every mile I hiked, I wanted to raise $1. It wasn't a lofty goal, but I thought $2,200. So I sent out this fundraiser, and people so generously donated, way above and beyond my expectations. So I thought, well, I have all this money now, I guess I have to hike. So I went ahead, and the total I raised was $3,670. $2,670 I split, and I gave to some to Lead K. Do you all know of Lead K? That was to support children signing to make sure that program was robust, and then also to CODA Camp at Kmark 7. And then help them buy a canoe. So this is the end, and I made a sign. I was in town, I was trying to find a box, I was trying to find something. I grabbed this cardboard, and I'm looking, trying to find a marker and figuring out what I'm gonna write. I love my mom, but what my mom would always do, she would always do this pose. So I thought, okay, I got it. I know exactly what I'm gonna do. So I'm holding the sign in my mouth, and I'm doing this pose at the end of my hike. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what to expect in the rest of my presentation today. I'm going to stand here and talk to you while you are just watching. It's not my plan. I'm going to tell my story, but I want to hear your stories as well. This is not just about me. Maybe I can provide some information or a lesson. I don't know, but I don't know what the benefit to you is going to be. But my goal is really to share with you my story, and then you can take that story and continue on with your own stories. So we're going to talk a little bit about privilege quickly. I'm going to ask you some questions to give you some food for thought. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about go, the word go. We're talking about parallel roads, which I guess I'll elaborate on when we get there. And then if there are any questions or curiosities from the audience, we'll take those at the end. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the AT first. It's 2,189.8 miles from Georgia to Maine. So we usually just say it's 2,000 plus miles. It is long. It is far. Sorry, you can't get to Georgia. You can't see Maine from there. You have to go tree by tree, step by step the whole way, every single day through the forest. So it goes through 14 states, starts in Georgia the whole way up to Maine. Some states are only 9 miles. Some states are 550 miles. Some are much shorter, and then others are quite a lot lengthier. Altogether, it started officially in 1921, and there have been less than 15,000 successful thru hikers since then, of which I'm one. You start at Springer Mountain in Georgia, and then the northern terminus is Mount Katahdin. The fastest record for hiking is a hiker that did the whole trail in 45 days, which means about 80 miles per day. So I have to say a lot of thank yous. If I didn't grow up with a sign, I wouldn't hike. I wouldn't have done this, period. From my upbringing with my parents who signed, I really learned about job opportunities. I had networking opportunities. I went to summer camp. I had some experiences with the outdoors because of sign language. I came here. I remember my first semester here at RIT. I wasn't sure I would stay here. I didn't really know what would happen. And then I really fell in love with sign language and interpreting, and I realized it was such a good opportunity for me. And again, that came to me through sign language, and I got this job opportunity with Joshua in Croatia. And through that job, I was able to support myself and afford to do it. And through my networking in the deaf community, I could afford emotionally. I could financially and emotionally and physically. I had all the resources, and that was all connected to sign language. And so I have to say thank you to the deaf community, because without the deaf community, I wouldn't have had the ability to reach my goals. If I had sent out my fundraising request in February and everybody had liked it and donated it, I thought, well, I have to hike after that happened. So that really provided me with a lot of inspiration. Additionally, I have personal privileges. I'm white. A lot of hikers, I would say 95% of hikers on the AT are white. I know some hikers from South America, some hikers that are black, but they do have a harder time. I just went about my time hiking in Georgia, in Tennessee, in North Carolina. It's in the South. And they're not in big cities. We're in very small towns and rural populations with a lot of different perspectives. So if you have a black hiker, those people encounter more challenges. I'm hearing. I'm not deaf. I identify as a coda, but I can hear. Just want to make sure you understand the clear difference there. But I do have the privilege that every night I would get together with a group and I could talk about what I was going through and people would understand me. If I was deaf and trying to sign, there are some deaf hikers, and it's really difficult for them. They are very, very lonely in their experience. And I have to recognize that, a reason that I can succeed is because of my hearing privilege. It's not because deaf people cannot do it and cannot succeed, but it does make it harder. Additionally, I grew up in a middle-class family. I don't have to support my family by working. I was able to financially afford to take 7 months off work. I'm a male. There are a lot of female hikers. But I was always thinking, if I was alone, if I went to a shelter, and this is how I'm going to sign shelter. If I was a woman sleeping alone in a shelter, if I heard a sound in the middle of the night for 2 other hikers coming into the shelter, I would have to think if they were male or female. If I'm a female alone in the woods, it might be a little more difficult. I'm a male. I don't know. I don't have that experience. But I would expect that it would be more difficult for a female. I'm healthy. I'm physically healthy. But before I really get into my presentation, I have a question for you. What's your dream? I want you to think about it a little bit. What are your goals? What are your dreams? So now I want you to think about what's stopping you from achieving those goals and dreams. Are they financial? You're tied to work? And what are you willing to sacrifice for those dreams? Are you willing to sacrifice everything or nothing? And I don't have the answer to that. I can't answer for each of you. But I want you to think of that while we go through. Through hiking for 7 months and 2,000 miles, there's one thing I learned, and it was simple. Just go. You don't have to make a big production of things, check off all these lists, fill out forms. Just go. If you think I'm not ready, well, good luck, because you're never going to be ready. You just have to go. So I want to talk a little bit about dream malleability. Does anybody know what city this is? Did you say Rochester? It's Boston. Yep, this is Boston. My original dream was not to hike. My original dream was that I was going to move to Boston. I was going to become a great interpreter. I was going to be new to the area and get settled in. And then my senior year here as an interpreting student, we had a senior gala, which was the same weekend that I had booked my test to get an interpreting license in Boston. So I rented a car, and instead of going to my senior gala, I went and took the interpreting test for the licensure in Boston. I felt okay about it. Wasn't sure if I was going to pass or not. Came back to Rochester, finished up school, graduated, and I got a letter in the mail that said I failed the licensure test. I did not pass. So I had already committed for 5 months of work in Croatia with Josh, but then through the summer, I didn't know what to do. I thought, do I need to go home and live with my mom? I mean, I love my mom, but to stay in her house for 5 months, I did not want to do that. It was not on my list of possibilities. So I was really brainstorming what I could do at this point. And I kept thinking again about the AT. My hiking experience, I Googled. I had Googled how long it would take to hike the AT. They said 5 to 6 months. Remember? With my mom. I said, I'll go for it. And I told my mom, when I'm done in Croatia, my mom told me to go to it. And when I got home from Croatia, I was going to go to hike the AT. Okay. But it was always there, I was never really committed 100%. I wasn't 100% willing to go for it. I wasn't ready. But that planted the seed when I had that conversation with my mom, and things went from there. But my point is that dreams change. You're going to face obstacles, and how you get through those obstacles are different. So if I had passed that test for my license in Boston and I was able to interpret there, I wouldn't have been hiking. But that door closed on me, and then another door was open to me. I was just able to move through and figure out what's next instead of getting frustrated. If you really want something, you can do it. You have to. You have to sacrifice things, and just, again, that simple go. You might have no idea what these words mean. There are a lot of hiking terms for hiking culture. Hiker trash is the first one. That just means, it's really kind of hard to explain. It just means that you notice someone who's a hiker. You can tell the difference between a hiker and a non-hiker. You know who is hiker trash. Probably wearing super short shorts, long beard, long dirty hair, and a very distinct smell of hiker trash. The next one is through hiker. Means a person who hikes far. Not a person who goes out for the day and does a hike. Not a person who does 100 miles of the AT, but maybe takes multiple months, 1, 2, or 7. I picked some that I'm going to use. We're going to talk about blaze. That's just the white paint you see on the tree that shows the AT that you're on the trail. It's like a trail marker. The white blaze means that it's the Appalachian Trail. It doesn't say go this way or that way. You're just lost. You have to look and find that white blaze. The blue blazes means that water's near, or this follow the blue blazes for water. It might not be officially on the AT, on the trail, but if you get to the top of the mountain and you look and you want to see a view, you have to go off the trail on a blue blaze. A yellow blaze means that there's a road close. Like yellow in the middle of the road, they use the yellow blaze for roads. So if you have something called yellow blazer, that'll be the person who hikes near a road, walks out and hitchhikes, and then drives ahead. So it's a way to cheat and skip some miles on the trail. If you see a pink blaze, that means a good place to flirt with women. I mean, you're hiking, but if you see a girl come through, you might decide to be a pink blazer and turn your hike around. And then a banana blazer is when you follow a guy. If you see a guy go a different way, it might be a good time to turn around and follow that banana blaze. So trail magic is an unexpected gift you get on the trail. That can mean a variety of different things. I'll give you an example later. But if somebody sets up eggs, and you get there and they ask you how many eggs you want, and you say as many as I want, I'm going to eat 8 eggs. It's it's an unplanned magical surprise when you're hiking, or you hike and you see something coming up to you and you say, I'm going to leave the trail soon. I only have a day left maybe. I have all this food. Do you want it? That's definitely trail magic. It's often food-related magic. So there are 3 different parts. There's my southern part, the middle, and then the Maine and New Hampshire section. The first part was the southern part. I'll talk a little bit about my backpack, which I have with me. I had a different, heavier, cold backpack. I was hiking in the kind of weather we have today for a month. It was cold every single day. My shoes were frozen. I had to sleep with my water near my body because if I left it outside, it would be frozen. My friends and I were sleeping in hammocks. They had a pee bag, so you didn't have to get up and pee in the night. You could just pee when you're in your hammock right off the side, and then they would hang it. You got up, and even the pee bag was frozen. I mean, you can't throw it away. What do you do with it? You need to use that bag again. You hike with it. It melts a little, and as it melts, you toss it out and pour it on the ground and keep going. I almost had hypothermia. I was pretty close. Hiking was safe, yes, but sometimes you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I learned that the hard way. So when I was in Franklin, I'll tell you about Franklin. And then I had my first hiking family. It was 4 guys, and these are the names of the people I was hiking with. And Butt Trumpet was because they were quite flatulent, so they got the name Butt Trumpet. Blueberry is me. And Downward Cow got their name because they would hike down really timidly. They hated going down. Going up was fine, but down was no fun for them, so they were kind of like a cow trying to go down a hill. And then Nitro was a student from UCF, University of Central Florida, and their college mascot is Nitro, so that was the name they were assigned. But hiking names aren't regular, definitely not regular names. Usually something will happen, and then somebody gives you your hiker name. And then this is on the side is a picture of those white blazes. This is in Georgia. Really, they went through a lot of drought, so you could see around, you could see the fires and a lot of things were destroyed by the natural resources. So you could see a lot of things were charred and black here. The ground was empty because of the fires. I mean, those are regular fires. They work on a cyclical cycle, so they are part of the ecosystem there. And this is in the Smoky Mountains. You remember I showed you Franklin before? You know what Franklin is? I can't get this right. Franklin is my Pop-Tart. I named my Pop-Tart Franklin. And that's how I got my name Blueberry, too. When I was in a town, I walked to the grocery store, and my money was really scarce, so I'm trying to find a high-calorie, low-cost dinner. And so I found a box of Pop-Tarts. It was like the family size. I think it had 16 packs of Pop-Tarts, so I'm super psyched about this, ready to go. It was really heavy. So I get back to the hostel. I'm talking with other hikers. I was new. Had only hiked like 80 miles at this point, a few days. So I'm talking to a guy, and he had been back to hike in Georgia because he had skipped it before because Georgia was having a wildfire and then came back down to finish up. So he's laughing at me about this huge box and gave me the name Blueberry. I thought that was a super lame name. I didn't, whatever. I didn't know if it would stick. So the next day I ate 7 of those 8 Pop-Tarts. It was cold. It was like 50 degrees that day. You know, I strapped on the belts of my backpack. I started sweating. I'm like, it's supposed to be cold outside. I'm feeling terrible. I'm nauseous. I had to find a tree, relieve myself near the tree. And I thought, never again am I going to eat one of these Pop-Tarts. So I had one left. And I took that Pop-Tart with me the whole entire way. Starting in Franklin, North Carolina, which is the name of the town where my Pop-Tart got its name, to Mount Katahdin in Maine. So it's pretty great that that Pop-Tart can hike that many miles. And yes, the answer is I did eat it at the end. It was cold outside over on this screen. The night before this picture was taken, I had hiked with Butt Trumpet. We had hiked through the rain. We were soaking wet. We finally get in to eat and go to bed. And overnight it had been 8 degrees. And everything froze, including my shoes. I hadn't opened them up either when I took them off. They were tied. I couldn't get them untied. I couldn't get my foot in. And I'm like, okay, I'm not getting outside. This means I need to stay in the shelter. I need to stay warm in my sleeping bag. So we're talking it over. You know, we put all the clothes are frozen. We had hung them up on the line. They were frozen, like hung up. I couldn't even get them on my body because they weren't pliable enough. I have a picture of my socks that day. They were frozen. Every single thing was frozen. It was so cold. We thought, oh, we will start a fire and warm them up. The wood was frozen. We're trying to light this fire. And then after it was frozen, we tried to get it warm. It just melted. So we're trying for 4 hours to start this fire. And someone finally said, you know, put everything in the sleeping bag and then warm it up. And finally, it started to smoke. We saw a little bit of smoke. I mean, it was still wet, but we put all our clothes there. Our clothes got wet. Finally, just put them on, and we went. Just go. So this is supposed to be this beautiful view, and this was our view. Didn't really get that beautiful view. We saw some snow. We saw ice. And this is in Tennessee. Luckily, before this photo, we were in town. And I bought some whiskey. We were in Tennessee. We had to buy a little bit of whiskey. So I had this little bottle, and we're hiking. And the night before, it was cold, but it was really nice. It was beautifully clear. You could see out. So nice. Went to sleep and woke up the next day to quite a lot of snow. So I put on all my layers and drank all the whiskey almost and decided that it would be warm enough to hike at that point. So off we went. And it was warm. And sometimes you just have to, like I said, just go. You can't wait for the condition to be perfect. Hiking's a good way to get warm. If you're still warm, hike faster. No food, no water, you better go. If you just keep going, keep hiking, and you'll get where you need somehow. This is in a hostel. I can't figure out these screens. So that's Cal and Butt Trumpet. And then over on the right is the other guy, Shay. We gotten through the cold. We got to the warm hostel. Everyone was so happy. We got pizza. That hostel, I think, was pretty dirty. We were sleeping in a bunkhouse with, I think, 15 other people at that time. Half of them were workers. They had dogs barking all night. You know, I just paid $20 to sleep in a warm spot and then get up and kept going again. In North Carolina, they have something called Max Patch. It's a bald spot on the mountain because before, for the Native Americans, had a ritual that they would come and clear all the trees and have a celebration in this spot. There were no trees to block the wind, so it was super, super windy, and we decided we would do cowboy camping when we were here, which means you don't have a tent, you don't have a hammock. I had been using a hammock, but you need some trees to hang up your hammock. There weren't any trees, so you just got in your sleeping bag on the ground. When I woke up, this was the view that day. So we have some trivia for you. Just on average, how many calories does a hiker burn? How many thinks A? 2,000. Who thinks A? Who thinks B? And C, who thinks C? The answer is B. The people who thought B are right. On average, but some days I definitely got to 8,000 calories. Which is the hardest? To go north? NOBO means northbound, so that means you start in Georgia and go down or go up. A is southbound, you start in Maine and go down. C is flip-flop, you start in the middle and do each section. So who thinks going south? B. And who thinks in the middle, starting in the middle? B, wait, excuse me, A, starting in Maine and hiking to Georgia is actually the startest. Because if you start in Maine and New Hampshire, you're in trouble. The mountains are so high. You haven't had any practice, you haven't built up your muscles, you're just trudging your way up these mountains. If you pass Maine and New Hampshire, you'll be fine. But if you start in Georgia and go to Maine, you are able to get your feet wet, get your muscles built up, and then you get to the end and it's no problem because you're ready to go. But if you start north, no thank you. No thank you. And then the third one. So my backpacking experience before I started, do you think I was a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout, or no experience? Who thinks I was a Boy Scout? Anybody? Okay, how many people think I was an Eagle Scout? And how many people think I had no experience? Yeah, everybody who thought I had no experience is totally right. I had day hiked. I'd gone out for the day, but with a full backpack, food, shelter, and everything I needed, was a new experience for me. My first day was February 11th, which was my first day on the trail. I wasn't ready when I started. I had a trial by fire, you know? I learned the hard way. I learned my lessons really quickly and moved on. And that happened a lot. And then I became more tough for it. So that was the southern part, and then the middle section of the hike. You see that sign? Can you guys read it? It says, please no dead deer, no deer carcasses. And the people that would drive two old people would come pick up the trash. For hikers to find a trash can was a huge deal because when you eat something, you can't throw away or burn the packaging. You have to keep it in your backpack. And sometimes you have all kinds of trash. And once you find a can, it's wonderful to be able to put it somewhere. But sometimes deer carcasses are left there. That's definitely a hiker trash issue. And then I met my second hiking family there. I went home because I grew up in Maryland. I went home and stayed for a week during this time. I looked on Instagram while I was home. I was looking at different hikers, and there was a guy that hiked 20 days straight, no days off, 20 days. I thought I can do that, and that really became my inspiration. And and I had 12 of 14 states completed at that time. This is in Virginia. It's a place called McAfee Knob. It's a really, really famous spot. So I hiked, looked around, asked someone to take a picture, and so I'm trying to get this really great pose. I look at it and I'm like, yeah, okay, perfect. And then that day I had 27 miles. So that picture of me, I had to try to get into a specific town before nighttime, so I grabbed my picture and kept going. This is my original sleeping bag. Not great. It was huge. My backpack was pretty much full of one sleeping bag, which was great because it was so cold in the south. But then my mom drove and met up with me, and we switched, and I was able to get a new sleeping bag, which was amazing. You remember before I was telling you I replaced some stuff? This sleeping bag was a big one. I got this nice little compact sleeping bag for the rest of my trip. So they also have a Highland Park. It's called the Grayson Highlands, the Shetland Highlands, and they have Shetland horses. And they scared me when I came up on them. So I was just in my groove walking, and then all of a sudden I see these ponies looking up at me, like, "What are you doing in my space?" They're just used to being there, so I'm like, all right, trying to get all these pictures with them. And finally, I had gotten to where all these horses are, and cows, just cows. They're boring. And then I got to the halfway point in Harper's Ferry. They have the Appalachian Trail headquarters there. So they'll take your picture, the number. I was number 95 of people who had gone past there this year. Your name, and then Georgia to Maine, which way I was going. And then, all your information. But you can go to Harper's Ferry in the Appalachian Trail headquarters, and they have a book that goes back of all the hikers. Some people who made it and some people who didn't. I was number 95 of 2017. Of course, I wasn't going to have a boring picture. I wanted to have something that was memorable and racy. While I was in Maryland, my mom really organized this great day of deaf people to come and support me and hike with me. You can see I'm starting to get a little bit shaggy here in this photo. Some people were codas, some deaf people. It was really great. And I really felt like I was like, all right, I can do this next half. And they helped me feel like I could really go the rest of the way. This is just a picture of what your general shelter will look like. They're pretty nice. This was a nice one. Some of them are not so nice. I didn't sleep in a shelter. I use that hammock. So I would just find 2 trees, tie up my hammock, and jump in. This is the border of Pennsylvania. You're getting out of Pennsylvania. You have to go over the bridge, and all of a sudden you're in New Jersey. Sometimes they have little plaques, Georgia to North Carolina, and some of them are like these painted borders, but they have the borders markings in every state. And then the picture above that, you can see my shoes, which I also have here. Guess how many pairs of these I went through? Does anybody know? You think 4? Right? 10 pairs maybe? This is my 5th pair of these shoes. So the ones on the outsides were the new ones. They were nice and blue. The ones on the inside you could see. I averaged like 500 to 600 miles, and then they just gave out. I couldn't use them anymore. The picture on the top right, I'm hiking all of a sudden one day and I see an ambulance at the trailhead. So, of course, I am new. Every day was pretty routine for me, so I thought an ambulance would be kind of an exciting experience. So I decided to go eat lunch and see what was going on. But what had happened was a woman had fell and hurt her ankle and called the ambulance. And then the news came to do an interview. Which I was like, come on, this lady fell. She really needs to do an interview. So I'm sitting there eating my lunch. And then some people come up to me, which I already, of course, knew what was going to happen. And they come up and they say, oh, you're a hiker. Yes, yes, I am. Oh, can we interview you? So I agreed. And they asked me where I was from. And I told them Georgia. And at this point, I was in New York. I think I was in New York, yeah. And they asked me how long. And so I told them the whole story. I mean, I was bored. I thought an interview was a lot of fun. I might be on TV. It was pretty nice. I'm looking scraggly, smelling really terrible. Put myself on TV. I think this is pretty great. I didn't care. Didn't care at all. So then we get done with the interview, and I put my backpack on and started hiking again. These are the 2 most beautiful states for sure. New Hampshire and Maine. The other states were beautiful too, but once you got here, I mean, I grew up in Maryland. There are some mountains, but mountains like New Hampshire, mountains like Maine, not even close. I couldn't believe it. It was so amazing. You really are crazy is something. Well, I'll tell you about that when we get there. We'll talk about the White Mountains. That's my favorite part of the whole entire trip. And then a little story about lobster. So you can see as we go on the trip, my beard is growing, my hair is growing. I find, when you get to 100 miles, 200 miles, there are a bunch of different milestones. And people take flowers or sticks and make the numbers. So this is 2,000. So I'd finally gotten to 2,000 miles, which meant that I had 189 miles left to go. So this is in the White Mountains. And this is something called Franconia Ridge. So you're hiking up these mountains, and then you get to these little ridges, and you can see so far in every single direction. It's so nice hike. It's really windy, but it's so beautiful. This is in Maine. This is the first big mountain that you hit in Maine. Again, you can see I got my short shorts. And that was my town shirt, my fancy town shirt. Because I was getting close to the road, I had to look a little bit more friendly, a little bit more presentable. So I'd put on my fancy town button-down shirt and try to get a ride. Try to hitch a ride to town. Because if I wasn't on the AT, I wouldn't walk, 4 miles to town. I wouldn't walk it. I would try to get a ride. Sometimes the first car would pick me up, and there I am. Sometimes I would have to wait 45 minutes. Sometimes I'm on the side of the road begging people to give me a ride. Finally, I realized the best thing to do was really just stick that leg out in my short shorts, and I get picked up right away. There are a lot of lakes in Maine. It's full of lakes, and this is one of them. I'd been hiking, and I saw a lake, stripped down, and jumped right in. Went for a swim and kind of took a bath at the same time. I didn't shower very often. I would say probably every 10 to 15 days I would get a shower. So if there was water, I was taking a bath. It was cold, got to wash my hair, and then I waited to dry off, suited back up, and kept going. Remember I was talking about the guy that was cooking eggs, the trail magic? Right on the side of the trail that he had a set up here. And I asked, how many eggs one person had ever eaten, what his record, and he said the record was 28 eggs from one person. One hiker ate 28 eggs. I ate 8, and I was pretty full. I thought 28 was crazy. Some hikers can seriously put down the food. This was my laundry day. I'm washing everything. Socks were gross. I mean, to be honest, they were disgusting. You get wet and you try to wring them out, there's black water coming out of them. You wring them out more and rinse them, and they're still black. You know, after 15 or 20 times, they may become a little bit gray. You just gotta rinse them and wring them out. Finally, you get to like a yellow. That's good enough to stick them back on and keep hiking. I like this picture. So again, we're in the White Mountains. This is Mount Washington, which has the record for the highest wind speeds on land. I think it's like 300 and something, 200 to 300. I don't know what it was, but it was super windy. So it's raining. We're in the north. I don't have pants on. I'm only wearing shorts at this point. I have a small jacket, so they have huts in the White Mountains, so you can, get there and come back and warm up. They have warming hunts. And I'm thinking, I have 20 miles to hike. I gotta go. And one woman's looking at me like, you're nuts. You're in these shorts and this tiny little jacket. And I'm like, yeah, it's what I got. I gotta go. So I'm walking up. I finally get to the summit. And there's a woman who asked if I wanted a picture. So I give her my phone. And my phone didn't have a case. It was in a plastic bag. It was in a Ziploc baggie. So I take it out of the Ziploc baggie, and this woman's looking at me like I'm crazy, trying to figure out what is going on with me. So I give her my phone. I stand there. It's freezing. It's like 20 degrees outside. So I stand there super thrilled looking. And the woman, while she's taking the picture, she says, "Wow, you really are crazy." And I'm just grinning. And I put my phone back in my bag and just keep on going. So this is the first time I saw the last mountain, Mount Katahdin, over here. And then I finally felt like I was really almost done. It was going to happen. There were a lot of emotions at that point of everything that I had been through and what was to come. But, leading up to that, I just kept telling myself just had to keep going, just had to keep hiking. And so I still did. So when you get there, you think you're so close. But it's what's called a false summit. So you get up to what you think is the summit, and you're so excited to be there, and then you realize that you're not, and you have to actually continue hiking to the true summit. So now you can see the one in the back. It has a sign there. You have to hike another 4 miles to actually get to the summit and finish. And so this is when I did 2,189 miles from Georgia to Maine. I cried a little bit at the end here, yeah. But it doesn't feel done. I definitely checked it off. Went down and got in the car. I felt like, okay, where am I going to hike tomorrow? And I woke up in the hotel room and felt like, all right, where is there to hike today? It took a while to realize that I was 100% finished. I told you I wasn't kidding. I brought it the whole way, and then I ate it. So honestly, I opened it up. So my girlfriend was with me on that last day, and she's looking at me like I'm not actually gonna eat the Pop Tart. But I told her I brought it from South Carolina or from North Carolina. I definitely have to eat it. So I open it up, and it's all crummy and has a little bit of mold on it. And I told her, oh, it tastes great. And then I swallowed it and said there was a little mold. But I knew that if I had hiked 2,000 miles, if she had hiked 2,000 miles, she would have eaten it too. And so she took that as enough reason. But you see, my beer looks pretty good. I was looking pretty great at that point. So now, what have you been thinking about? What's your dream and what's your excuse? So you see the family in the top? They hiked the whole Appalachian Trail with a baby at 8 months old. They had jobs, excuse my language, but they thought all that stuff was bullshit. And all their excuses. They hiked it with a baby. They figured it out. They worked it out. They took the time. They figured out what to do for her diapers, what to do if she was cold, how much food, and they did it. And then the top right is an 82-year-old. He's the record holder for the oldest hiker. Again, if he can do it, what's your excuse? And in the bottom right is the trail named String Bean, and he is the record holder for the 45-day shortest hike. You think you might not have enough time, but again, if he can do it in 45 days, what's your excuse? What are your dreams? What are you willing to sacrifice for those dreams? Just go. Just go. All right, that's it for me.